Ooh, we need to move the camera a little bit. Hi, welcome to A Mirror Darkly, Unbridled Inquiry. This is Robin pounding on the camera. I'm Ruth, this is Oreo, and today's topic is Why So Downcast, Oh My Soul. Before we start on that though, I was watching the 9/11 coverage, and something someone said made me think about kind of a crisis, an identity crisis that some people in America seem to be having about being an American. So one of the things that was brought forward was by the way, we're having some streaming issues. We're not sure why. I was having some trouble getting on my phone, so I don't know if it's like a general internet thing or what's going on. But we apologize in advance for any technology issues you're experiencing. So anyway, they were talking about how America really came together after 9/11, and there's going to be a Mets-Yankees game today at Citi Field, and talking about when they played right after 9/11 and how former President Bush, he was president at the time, encouraged them to go ahead and play and what really stuck out to me was the whole idea on our money. It says e pluribus unum, from many one, and how the firefighters and police officers that ran toward the danger were all different religions, all different races, all different genders, all that stuff. They were united in their desire to help. The people in Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, they all came together as one unit to overcome the hijackers because they felt it was their only chance to survive and to save other lives. And I think that it's really important that if you are talking to someone who you don't agree with, that you find some point of agreement, something you can agree upon, and start from there, rather than separating yourself and arguing over things that really don't matter. That you find some kind of common ground and start from there, and build some kind of relationship with that person. The other thing I was thinking about too is from many one, if you think about what the Bible talks about the parts of the body and how we are as the body of Christ, your body parts are all different. Your hand is different from your foot, which is different from your brain, which is different from your spine. And all your body parts are different, but they're all just as important for your functioning. I fell at work this week and I landed on my right arm. This will be the third really significant injury to my right hand, which doesn't function real well because of the injuries that I've had over the years. And I was worried about it at first because I landed really hard on a tile floor with my arm extended like this. And thankfully, I wasn't hurt really badly. I'm just kind of sore. When I reach certain ways, it hurts. But if you don't, and one of the students was asking me yesterday after PE, are you doing okay? Because all of third grade saw me fall. There was no keeping that secret. We were doing PE inside. I fell off the stage steps, so I thought it was on the floor, and I wasn't, but I soon was. So anyway, she asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm fine. She said, well, I'm really glad you didn't break your arm. I said, well, me too, because that's my right arm, and that would make my life really difficult because I'm right-handed. And she goes, oh, I'm left-handed, so I could break my right arm and it wouldn't be such a big deal. And so just that little conversation with an 8-year-old made me realize that, I mean, I already knew it. You kind of just take it for granted. But when you injure a part of your body like that, it affects the whole rest of your body. So it affects its functioning and all that. So anyway, that was what I got about 9/11, and I think that we should be honoring those people that died, and that the people that tried to rescue the people that were in trouble as well as the people who were in trouble through no fault of their own. They just went to work. They were just flying on airplanes that day, and nothing out of the ordinary, and a horrible tragedy happened. So, and I think that the best way we can honor them is to build a stronger and more cohesive America. So someone you disagree with, find some common ground and build your relationship with that person.
Right.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox. And hi, Steve. Steve's here, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, today's topic to some extent ties into the date that it happens to be,
right.
So it's reasonable. Now, the phrase that serves as the title, Why So Downcast, O My Soul, King James Version of Psalm 42 and 43. Psalm 42 and 43 were originally just one unified psalm. For whatever reason, they got cut into two separate psalms, but it's all one composition. And so it begins, as the deer pants for a stream of water, so my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I used to go to the house of God under the protection of the Mighty One, with shouts of joy and praise among the festive throng. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God. My soul is downcast within me, therefore I remember you, from the land of the Jordan to the heights of Hermon, from Mount Mizar, deep calls to deep, and the roar of your waterfalls, all your waves and breakers have swept over me. And then, of course, the psalmist complains about, well, why has God forgotten me? And again, asking the question, why so downcast? And then chapter 43, it moves on and asks for God to intervene and do something. It's easy, depending on what happens on a day-to-day basis, to either be happy or sad, depending on circumstances. We have expectations that things will go a certain way, and when things do not go the way that we had expected them to go, we are going to be disappointed. And if they consistently don't go the way we would like them to go, that is, if all the news that we receive is bad, we become increasingly discouraged and sad. One of the things I've noticed on Facebook are the number of people that, based on what they post on their Facebook feeds, I'm fearful that they spend most of their days watching the news. And of course, cable news being a 24-hour thing makes that a possibility. And the problem is that the news is going to be, without exception, bad. Mm-hmm. Because that's what's out of the ordinary. And as the old saying goes, if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news is what pays the bills for the news channels. And so if you're feeding yourself constantly negative material, which is what the news is, it's all negative, it's easy to become very discouraged, to imagine that there's no hope, that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, that nobody cares. Everybody is stupid, everybody has wrong ideas, we're surrounded by bozos, and it's just an awful, awful, awful thing, and we are doomed as doomed can be.
And also, if you're only getting your news from one source,
yes,
that is also an issue too, because not only do you think we're doomed as doomed can be, you're only getting one point of view.
Yes, but regardless of which sources you're looking at, the news is universally bad. And the problem with it is that news is anecdotal. As one would hope that most people have realized, anecdotal evidence is not really evidence at all. It doesn't really give you a clear picture of what is going on.
But the problem is that you'll present somebody with data, like something like 80% of people like Cheerios over cornflakes. And then that person will say, yeah, but 5 of my friends, and I only have 6, like cornflakes more than Cheerios. And so, like, as if that's real evidence.
And so they just discount
Uh-huh.
the evidence
Right.
because it's not part of their experience, or it doesn't match. In the case of those that read the news or listen to the news constantly, it doesn't match what they're seeing on their screens, and so they believe what they see on the screen as opposed to rather boring data.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is that the data is not usually presented in any way that's interesting. It's hard to find because the news is not going to tell you the underlying data for 2 reasons. One, it's boring, who cares? And number 2,
Doesn't get ratings or clicks.
and number 2, the journalists, for the most part, are complete and utter morons. They are doing well if they can read their teleprompter. These are not people that know how to do research. They're not ones to try to discover what the facts are. One reads or hears every so often about some shocking news story that has been publicized, and then we learn that the people responsible for the news report did not actually bother to look into the question at all.
Well,
They
there
didn't
was
call-
just an example of that.
Yes, Rolling Stone magazine,
Yes.
who has done this more than once, actually, reported certain things, and it turned out that none of what they were saying was true at all, and they hadn't even bothered to
And all we had to
call
do
the
was
hospital.
call one hospital.
Yeah,
That
call
was
the
it, one
hospital
phone call.
involved. And I've seen it before, and it's not just in news. You see the same thing with books. I keep harping on this because, well, he's dead, so it doesn't matter. And also, he strikes me as not being that competent. Larry Burkett. He wrote a best-selling book. Lots of people swallowed it, from the publishers to those that gave him awards. The Coming Economic Earthquake, which came out, I think, in 1990 or thereabouts, or 92. Or
Oh, he's the coming economic earthquake guy?
yes.
Oh.
And
I thought it was somebody else.
no.
Okay.
It's a fairly thin book. It's published by Moody Press, Christian publisher. And he argued that, debt is a bad thing. And he tried to show from history and economics how, destructive this had been to economies, and how this presaged that come 1999, everything would go to hell in a handbasket and the world would be destroyed by a horrible depression. And so you needed to get ready for it. And he sold lots of books on this premise. The problem was, if you actually knew some history and knew some economics, you realized within a page or two, because somebody had given me this, said, oh, this is a great book, you need to read it, that he had no clue what he was talking about. That is, it wasn't just a matter of opinion, he had significant factual errors in the book, where he would say, well, this is what happened, and you could look at an encyclopedia and see that, no, that's not what happened. Where he'd say that this person was influenced by that person, when this person could not possibly have influenced that person if you just looked at their dates.
Was it like being named after a famous explorer when you were born, before the explorer did what the explorer did?
It was actually a lot.
Just kidding.
It's actually about like that.
Okay.
In his book, he claimed that Franklin Roosevelt had been influenced by John Maynard Keynes while he was in college. And the problem with that idea was that John Maynard Keynes was actually younger than Franklin Roosevelt, and so they would have both been at college at the same time on opposite sides of the world. It's very unlikely that Franklin Roosevelt read anything written by John Maynard Keynes, since John Maynard Keynes hadn't written anything yet except the papers he had to turn in for school. It's just utterly ridiculous. Then he made the comment someplace that Nixon had removed silver from the coins in the U.S. That is, if you look at a quarter or a half dollar or a dime, they're made out of nickel and copper. They're not made out of silver. But before a certain date, they had been made out of silver, and he said that Nixon was responsible for this. The difficulty is that this happened in 1964. Nixon didn't become president until 1969. So it's really hard to see how.
Would it matter if Nixon took silver out of the coins?
Well,
Does it matter that anybody did?
Well,
What was
his
point?
argument, he's making an old argument regarding the importance of money being backed by precious metals.
Oh.
And that if you don't do that, then you have all sorts of financial problems. Of course, we haven't had money backed by precious metals for 2 or 3 generations, if not more, and life goes on.
Wasn't that part of the problem with the Depression was...
Well, that's a complicated issue.
Okay, because I vaguely remember... Okay, so I took history in school, but not a historian.
Yes, which I was.
Yes, wasn't really a huge... I mean, the stories interested me, but having to memorize all the dates was kind of a turnoff. So, but I understand the importance of dates, but still, it's like sitting there going... So last Wednesday, I did this, or was it Thursday? Was it Wednesday? Was it Thursday? Not as important as your point and the story.
Yes. Yeah, if the problem for most people in learning history or caring about history is the way history is taught in school is incredibly boring because it's focusing on just unconnected facts and dates. And then on top of that, the books are written badly. As a history textbook is a very boring thing. It's not very well done at all. It's just a horrible way to present history. And so it's done badly all the time, and so nobody likes history. I mean, in the Harry Potter novels, it's being taught by a ghost, and that's kind of the way history gets taught, is like the ghost in Harry Potter. It's just boring, droning on and on and on. It's
Bueller.
Yes, it's just no good. But anyway, my point is that here's an author, best-selling author, made a bundle of money on this book, had no clue how to do his research, and presented something that simply wasn't so. And I mean, there are a whole series of things. I just gave you a couple examples. The book, in 150 pages or so, as long as it is mostly bogus. That is, everything is wrong in it. I wrote to him, and they blew me off. So I have no qualms about. And then when they did a second edition of the book, all the errors that I had pointed out were no longer in the book. Of course, the book was shorter than and had no substance.
It was only 12 pages.
And it had no substance to it whatsoever because all the supposed historical backing had been removed because there was no historical backing for his argument. And, of course, I got no credit for it either. So it's just, I don't have good feelings about him. Anyway, but this is the nature of journalists. That is, they, like him, had never been taught how to do research, did not know how to find data, did not know how to get past anecdotes or what you've heard or what you would like to be true or what you're afraid is true, which is what we see with people that get discouraged and downcast as they are watching the news all the time, because all they see is what's in the square of that box, and it's all bad, and they don't know that this is not an accurate picture of the world because they're seeing it, they're hearing it. Of course it has to be true. I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears. This has to be the way the world is. They're telling me that that's the way it is. And it's not.
So I'm kind of a news junkie. My parents always watch the news. I was raised on the Today Show and the NBC Nightly News. And I also used to watch CBS Evening News. And I, for most of the years that it was on, unless I was without a television, like when I was in college, watched CBS Sunday Morning, which is a news magazine. They try to do like more human interest stuff. They'll do a little bit on the like the news of the day, like whatever happened that week. But then most of the stuff is like, they do travel things and stuff like that. Anyway, but since a lot of the really controversial stuff, I've quit watching it because a lot of it is untrue. Now I've resorted to watching actual press conference, because now it's available to me, or to anybody, watching actual press conferences on the White House's Facebook page. Well, I get it through Facebook. I don't know if it's on their page, but anyway, it's like whitehouse.gov or something, but it comes up on my watch thing.
And of course you have access to C-SPAN.
Right. And then there's also YouTube where you can watch the actual videos instead of seeing the
Clipped-down
yes,
version.
the director's cut, what the director wants you to see.
Yes.
So I've resorted to having to get some of my news that way. And I've really cut out a lot of the popular news. I'll watch local news because I want to kind of know what's happening, you know, in like the LA area and up here and stuff. But as far as widespread news, I go on news diets periodically when it starts to make me feel depressed. But I'm very mindful of who I'm listening to. I don't watch the Today Show anymore because of what Savannah Guthrie did to that kid that was in Washington, D.C. Totally lost respect for her. I really liked her. I would have quit watching after the Matt Lauer thing, but I really liked Savannah Guthrie. She's very smart. She's from Arizona. But then she did that, and there was no apology for it, and I was just done. So CBS Evening News, I quit watching because they were just bringing up a bunch of stuff that wasn't true, and you could prove it wasn't true by watching. You careful about my news
It
sources
illustrates
now.
the importance of primary sources.
Right.
And again, it takes extra work, which is why most people don't do it. My primary suggestion regarding getting discouraged and down from a constant infusion of watching news channels all the time is that you might want to find a different hobby. That is, significantly reduce your exposure to cable news of whatever stripe it is, because it's going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you angry. You'll get mad at your neighbor who you don't actually know. You're just assuming that, you know, your neighbors who think differently from you must be horrific, horrible, mean-natured ogres. And of course, that's usually not the case.
Well, during the riots last year, I would go out my front door. I'd watch all, because being a news junkie, I'd watch all the riot stuff and want to see what's going on and where it's happening and what's, you know, all that stuff. And then I would go out my front door. My neighborhood's like super peaceful. We had one little dust up in town, but it was like about 1.5 miles from our house. And it went away pretty quickly because it wasn't what they thought it was. And so the protesters were like, oh, nothing to see here, and went home. But anyway, but that's one of the things you can do too if you're getting overwhelmed by the news. Just go outside your front door.
Yes,
It's
spend more
very
time
pleasant,
outside.
yes.
Go out, you know, since the pandemic has eased, you know, spend time with your friends, neighbors.
Go out for coffee.
Go out for coffee. Try not to just talk about the news. Find other things to engage in, because again, if you're just sitting there talking about what you have seen on TV, then it's going to be a sharing of misery and being unhappy together. Of course, being together and being unhappy may be better than being alone and being unhappy, but still, you might want to adjust that. The other thing to do, like I said, is try to find the actual data, to realize that what you're getting on the news is a very small snapshot of the world, and it's a snapshot that's focused on what's going wrong rather than what's going right. Because more things are going right every day than are going wrong.
Well, that's why I have to repeat the same news stories over and over and over again, because
that's all they got.
That's all they have. There's no other material.
Yeah, that is, you go to the airport and you can sit there all day and you'll watch airplane after airplane after airplane land, and wow, nobody died.
And you go home to watch the news, like, I wonder if they cover how many planes landed successfully.
No, you only hear about an airplane if something goes wrong with it.
Right.
You only hear about, you know, somebody at a job site that has done something horrific, not the people that don't do something horrific. You'll hear about the foster family that does something horrible to some poor child, and hear nothing about the hundreds of thousands of other foster families that are doing a good job taking care of children.
Right.
And so on. And the percentages of children that are in foster care, it's more than what we would like, but it's still a pretty small percentage of the overall child population. On and on and on. That's where the data can help you keep things in perspective. And that's part of what the psalmist is doing here, is he's trying to get himself in a better place. That is, he's asking the question, why am I feeling downcast? Why do I feel so bad? Because, and that even though his circumstances at the moment may be less than ideal, that's not all there is. There is more to life than just this particular problem that I'm facing at the moment. And the problems in our lives, as much as they afflict us and as much as they focus our minds, tend to be relatively small percentages of our day-to-day existences.
And you tend to just pick up on the negative stuff. Like, if you look...
And there's a survival aspect to it,
Right.
which is why we tend to always gravitate towards that, focus on it, because if there's a strange noise, those that pay attention to strange noises don't get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
So we have been through culling. The ones that paid attention to the bad noises are the ones that have survived, and so we have a predisposition to find bad things. We need to keep that in perspective if we can.
Right. Well, and thinking about things that are going well, and to realize too that, and there, you get to a point in your life, like a certain age, where you realize, I've seen this before, I've heard this before. Like, for example, the planet ending in 12 years, which is now I think 10 or 9, because of climate change and all that. And I remember in school on Weekly Reader, news, early exposure to news, and they were talking about overpopulation and how, in 30 years that the world would be overpopulated, people would be starving because of lack of food, there'd be rampant disease, all that kind of stuff. And then looking back on that, I remember talking to my dad, and I asked my dad, I said, do you think this is really going to happen? Because I was worried about it. I mean, I was as worried as that Greta Thunberg girl. I wasn't crying, and I wasn't going on the news going, the world's going to end, whoa. But I was concerned about it, and so I asked my dad, and he said, we have traveled this country. You've seen all the open space. It's unlikely we'll fill that all up with people. There'll be plenty of food. Don't worry about it. So I just shrugged it off because I trusted my dad, and I figured he knew because he was a grown-up. And sure enough, we're not overpopulated and starving to death. We have rampant disease now because of the pandemic, but we came up with a vaccine in very short order, in record time.
There is a protection for it if people will take advantage of it.
Right, and the vaccine is remarkably effective.
There's more than one even.
Yes.
We've got 3 different, well, in the U.S. we've got 3 different ones. There's some others in other parts of the world.
Right, and so...
which is an amazing thing.
Right, but so there's not overpopulation, even if, like, I'm not doubting that the climate's changing, because climate does change over time. I mean, there used to be icebergs where the Titanic sank, and there haven't been in a very long time, so obviously the water's a little warmer.
Yeah.
So there is some amount of change, but like, for example, the hole in the ozone layer, it was like a big deal like 30 years ago. Now, I asked him, I go, whatever happened to that hole in the ozone layer? Well, it's closing up. Now, part of it is because we get rid of aerosols and things.
Yeah,
certain
and see,
kinds
one of the
aerosols.
things that there's a tendency to undervalue or underestimate is human ingenuity.
Right.
That is, if it is a problem that is going to take a long time to hurt us, we always manage to solve those kind of
Right.
problems.
You adapt.
Without exception.
Right.
We fixed all of them.
Well, And my point about climate
Okay.
change is this. I don't think that it's completely caused by humans and what we've done on the planet. I mean, we
It
probably
is-
have some input,
it has
but I don't think
contributed
we
to
have
it.
as much control as we like to think we do.
Well, we always like to think that we can control everything.
And
of course we can.
the
but
science currently is that it's not going to change like it's not going to be like 400 degrees next summer, although it feels like it here in the desert.
Well, it's going to increase by like a degree or 2 Celsius by the end of the century.
Right.
Which would have some impact on how the weather behaves.
Right.
Obviously.
But
But we'll find ways to adapt.
And I was watching a meteorologist, I forget what his name was, but he was citing other way worse hurricanes than what just came through, the East Coast and that.
But again, we see on our screen this particular bad thing
Right.
now, and so
And the
everybody
reason
worries about
why
it.
so many people in New York died from the flooding was because they weren't expecting it.
Right.
And it was worse than they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, which happens
So,
with weather predictions.
and that will happen on occasion. But places like
Louisiana actually did better than they anticipated. The levees actually held quite well compared to what they experienced during Katrina.
Well, they upgraded them.
They had
since
upgraded
yeah.
them, fixed them, things, and so they were better prepared this time around, and things
And
went
you
much better.
learn from the failures. You fail your way to success. So, like, for example, I was talking to, we had a daughter for a year. She came and lived with us she had lived with us previously before that, but her senior year of high school, she came and lived with us. Well, she's married now and she has 3 teenage stepdaughters, and they wanted me to drive them home in our Tesla. They were staying in a hotel in Santa Clarita. So I was talking about earthquakes. We're crossing the San Andreas Fault, and I was showing them Vasquez rocks and talking about the things that have been filmed there, and they need to look for that big rock formation and all that. And I said, since I've lived here, they said in 30 years there's going to be a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault, and we're all doomed as doomed can be. And I said, I've been here over 30 years, and so far the San Andreas Fault hasn't budged very much. That may not be a good thing because you do need earthquakes, but
Of course, we've had other earthquakes.
right, we've had other earthquakes, but when you get an earthquake somewhere else, they go, oh, now the pressure on the San Andreas Fault is even worse, so now more will die, because they just love baiting us. So anyway, but my point was, I was telling them, I said,
Think of the ratings the news will
Right.
get when that happens.
I told them, I said, that big stack of freeway, when you come up into Santa Clarita from LA, because they had been down below, and I said, when you go down below tomorrow, that's what we call anything south of us is down below. When you go down below tomorrow, when you're on that, there's like several levels of freeway. I said that top one collapsed, and there was a motorcycle cop on that top freeway, and it collapsed under him, and he died from that fall. Our freeways, that the 14.5 interchange there, had been earmarked for seismic retrofit, meaning getting it upgraded for an earthquake. We'd had an earthquake back in 1970, the Silmar quake, and learned things from that, and learned how to make things more resilient in an earthquake. But that set of roads hadn't been retrofitted yet. Well, the governor of our state at the time was like, whoever gets this done fast and well gets extra money. And boy, those freeways were back up because we rely on that for getting down to the LA area. And it was back up, it's all retrofitted. And so I told them, if there is an earthquake, it's unlikely to collapse again unless it's a much bigger quake, which the Northridge quake was pretty big. So if it's that big that it collapses those freeways, we got a bigger problem than just freeways collapsing. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the houses, I told them, I said, my house went through the Northridge quake and it's still standing. And the house we lived in at the time survived it, and that house was even older and had been through the Silmar quake. Now we're far enough away, but we still felt it pretty strongly. So, but we learn how to survive things like that. And with the World Trade Center collapse, they didn't realize what a
fully loaded,
what a trap it was.
Yeah. Well, you don't anticipate that a fully loaded passenger jet
Right.
is going to slam into the side of it.
Right.
And so they designed it so that, a normal airplane smashing into it, it'd be unfortunate, but the building would survive.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a plane that not too long after takeoff, full of fuel, boom.
Yeah.
And so it just got so hot and it melted, it weakened the structure, and so it collapsed.
I mean, they had tried to bomb it before that,
and that didn't work.
And it didn't work.
I mean, it was bad, but it didn't cause the building to collapse because it's not. I mean, it was hard to make what happened happen.
Yeah.
And it took something that was unanticipated.
Yeah.
Which is the way things often happen. Now, one of the things, perspective is an important thing.
Hold that thought. I've been doing the 10-minute segments, but we've not been stopping. We've been talking through them. So if you have a question or a show idea or a comment, please put it into the comments and I will bring it up at the end of the 10 minutes. He and I have just been chatting away here. My watch goes off, I reset it, we're in the middle of talking about something, then I don't interrupt. So anyway, so please do put comments in there if you have any.
Anyway, what one sees with people watching the news, getting discouraged, getting unhappy, getting angry, getting worried, is a secular version of what we see within Christianity on a regular basis. Back in the 1960s or so, I think it was the 1970s, Charles Schulz did a series of Peanuts cartoons where Peppermint Patty goes to a summer camp. It's a Christian summer camp. And she's told about, the coming rapture and the apocalypse happening and all of this, and she's all freaking out about it. And then she's in an office there someplace, and she sees plans for, building new facilities and this and that and the other thing, and she's thinking, well, this is all bogus then. That is, and the problem is that people panic over, the coming apocalypse constantly, and yet life, for the most part, goes on. That is, the world does not end. People keep expecting the world to end, and it keeps not expecting to end. Now, of course, Christians will probably want to quote the passage, that Peter wrote, the world just continues on as it always has, not expecting, bad things to happen, and it'll just be like what happened with Noah and the flood. Of course, Noah survived the flood.
And the people were warned.
And people were warned. It wasn't a complete shock. But secular people will make fun of Christians for expecting the apocalypse to happen any day now, and looking at the sign, reading their newspapers and finding, okay, this proves that Jesus is coming back today. And no,
well, that's the way to ensure he's not, because the Bible says no one knows the day or the hour. So if you say Jesus is coming at 3:00 today, it's not then, because God goes, oh, foiled again. Now I got to change it to 4.
And so, quite frankly, the fear that overpopulation is going to take us out, climate change will take us out, drought will take us out, this, that, whatever is going to take us out. No, don't be looking for the apocalypse all the time. That's not a healthy way to live your life.
And it's not the point of life.
And it's not the point of life. That is, if there's a problem and it's within your ability to do something about it, then go ahead and fix it. That is, you see a piece of trash on the ground, fine, pick it up, put it in the trash can. If you can afford to have an electric car, put solar panels on your house, good. Recycle, good. But don't be in a panic. Don't be scared. Don't think that everybody else is an idiot or a moron or evil. Don't imagine that we are beyond hope. Ruth talked about that as you get older, you start thinking, well, I've heard this before. I've talked about this before. The value of knowing history is that it helps. It's a way of aging yourself even further than what you'd normally be able to. That is, you can look back through history. The dog does not like me.
You can look back. Sniffs your hand.
Yes, you can look back. Well, he's maybe hoping I have a treat. You can look back through history, and you can put the current crises into perspective. I will remind people that the Civil War was a far bigger catastrophe for the United States than anything that we have ever experienced before or since. That is, whatever you may think about current conditions in the U.S., they're nowhere close to what we went through back during the Civil War, nor is it trending in that direction, despite the breathless comments from journalists who probably could not tell you much about the Civil War because they don't know that much history. I mean, they're having a hard time sometimes. Like I said, they have a hard time getting through the teleprompter. So I wouldn't trust them to give you commentary on how bad things are now. For them, it's just, how can we boost our ratings today? How can we boost our ratings tomorrow? And it's all about the money. It has a very limited amount to do with what the truth actually is, because there's no perspective, there's no context. It's just, here is this horrible thing. You need to be worried and upset and sad and miserable, and keep watching so we can show you more stuff to be sad and miserable about. Just keep those eyeballs glued to our channel all the time. It's not a good way to live. It's not healthy. It's going to hurt you. Stress is not a good thing to have all the time. You have enough problems in your own personal lives to focus on. Don't become apoplectic. Thank you. About things that are beyond what you can do anything about. The world is not going to hell in a handbasket. I have told people repeatedly, I don't think anybody believes me, that we are living in the safest, most prosperous, healthiest, freest period in world history right now. This is the best it's ever been. Are we without problems? Of course not, because the world has always had problems. We've always had challenges. Something bad is going to happen today, something bad is going to happen tomorrow, and it will be
And the problems
on the news.
are there to make you stronger, not to defeat you.
Yes, you can fix that.
So, again, I'll tell the story about the trees in the biosphere. The biosphere is an artificial environment that was an experiment to see if it was possible to use this model to colonize the moon or Mars or whatever. And they tried having all the regions of the planet in one single, basically like a greenhouse. It's like mostly all windows.
Yeah.
And they're
trying to reproduce the Earth's biosphere in a very small space.
It failed, but they learned from it.
Right.
So they're failing
Which is
their
the
way
way
to
experiments
success.
work.
Right. Anyway, so they had these trees that grew really, really tall, these really nice big trees, and all of a sudden the trees started falling over. Well, what they learned was in the biosphere there's no wind. And the reason why tall trees stay standing is because they have to resist the wind. And so there's a constant onslaught of wind that strengthens them. Another example of that, here at the end of our building, we have some trees, and the trees have been there a really long time. They're pine trees, so they're obviously not native to this area, but someone planted them many moons ago, and they're like the tallest pine trees in the Antelope Valley, so we don't want to cut them down, but we had to take one out because it was diseased, and so they took it out. Well, the tree, they're standing in the wind almost always blows from west to east. And so
it was the furthest west tree that we had to take out.
So the tree next to it, we had some really high winds, and the tree fell over and took out, well, it didn't totally take out the corner of the building, but it knocked off part of our roof on the corner over there.
It's been fixed. Everything is fine.
Yeah. So, But anyway, and that's one of the reasons we think we have some connection issues, because that also knocked out our wire that handles our cable and our internet. So, but anyway, the tree collapsed because it was never hit by the wind as hard as the other tree was. The other tree had protected it. So we still have 2 more trees out there. And when it gets really windy, I worry that one of those is going to topple over because they haven't grown up with the same punishment from the wind. So we'll see what happens, but we don't want to take them out. But anyway.
It's been almost 2 years now, so perhaps their root system has strengthened, one could hope.
Perhaps a little bit.
Don't know.
But anyway, my point was, though, like that song, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger."
Right.
You know, it's the hard things in your life are designed to make you stronger and better. And the same thing is true with a country, with a particular group of people. You're stronger and better because of the hard times you've gone through. It's not meant to defeat you completely. So I think that's an important perspective. Think about the trees in the biosphere. And
also understand that how you react to whatever bad things happen, you're doing the best you can in the midst of a crisis.
Right.
Whether you're an individual or a group of people or a nation. And you may or may not always make the best choices, but you've done the best you could under the circumstances with the information you had available at the time, and doubtless you'll have made mistakes.
Right.
Be forgiving. Be merciful.
To others and to yourself.
To others and yourself.
Right. Well, it's like the Serenity Prayer.
Well, the Serenity Prayer, also what the author that you quote.
Maya Angelou?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you know better, you do better.
Right.
And also another thing that I say a lot, particularly in NAMI and when I'm teaching the family-to-family class, you don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you. So if you didn't know, you have to forgive yourself for not knowing because you didn't know until somebody told you. And so then once you understand it, when you know better, you do better.
Right.
And not get all down on yourself because you didn't know. And the other thing I like to tell people too, you can start anything good sooner, but you can't go back in time and fix that. Right. So you started it when you started it, and it's a good thing, and we're glad you're doing it now, even if you didn't start it sooner. So whether it's taking your blood pressure medication, losing weight, reading a good novel, whatever, you could have done it sooner, but you didn't. So get over it and continue doing the good thing.
When is the best time to plant a fruit tree? Well, 30 years ago. But you're not 30 years ago, so do it today.
Yeah, that's right.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's something, there's a certain amount of importance to living in the moment.
Yeah, it's like people will tell me, I've been thinking about going, somebody will say to me that they've thought about going back to college, finishing their degree, and then they'll think or say something along the lines, but I'm 40 years old or 50 years old, and so think how old I'll be when I finish. And it's like, well, you'll be that old regardless whether you go to college or not, so why don't you go to college, and then you'll be that old, but you'll also have the college degree.
Well, like our friend Judy, her aunt just died at 106 years old. When she was in her 60s, she decided to start running. Not from bad guys, just running for exercise. And she was in like some marathons and stuff. She was winning awards for her age group, because she was like the only one in her age group. She's like winning marathons at like 90 years old.
And 104, she was still doing them.
Yeah, and was she still doing them at 104?
She got a book written about her.
Yeah, and she was on TV. She was interviewed on TV. She did finally stop running, though, and she just passed away recently. She was 106. And so, sure, she could have started being a runner at 20 or 30 or 40. She didn't. And so she got a good 40 years of running out of it. And she was healthy. She was happy. And she just died because that's what happens.
Yeah, eventually
well, like
we
your
all
Uncle
try.
Chuck.
Yes.
His family was surprised when Uncle Chuck passed away. Then they looked and they're like, oh, wait, he was 104. It makes sense. So, I mean, if, somebody dies and you're like, oh, they were only 20. I wonder what happened. Hit by a train or whatever.
And you die, it's like, oh,
good for him.
Good for him.
Yeah. He lived 104 years, and now he's done.
Yeah.
So, yep. So.
Yeah. But, yeah, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on the people around you.
Dead airspace.
Yeah.
It looks like we were paused for a second, because I was waiting for you to talk, and you're like this, and I'm like this. Like those, what show was that? At the end, they would
that was
do those fake endings.
Yeah, it was
Is it
Police Files.
Police Files?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same guy that did the airplane movie.
Okay.
Police Files. I think that was what it was called.
No. It was it Naked Gun?
Well, that was the movie they made out of it.
Oh, okay.
But it was a very short-lived TV series.
Okay.
They did like 4 or 5
and
episodes.
during the credit roll, they'd be like this, and then you'd see them blinking.
Yeah, or they'd move a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how we'll end all of our shows now.
My point was that it's really easy to be critical. It's easy to point out faults. It's easy to always get down on yourself, get down on your neighbors, get down on your state, your country, whatever. You might want to stop that because it's not making you happy and it doesn't fix anything.
Right.
All you do is make everybody unhappy and angry. If you see a problem, work on the problem. Try to fix it. Being critical all the time, yelling all the time, being angry all the time, it's not good for you, and I don't think really
doesn't solve the problem.
Solve any kind of problem or fix anything. All you do is make then people mad at you.
Well, good point. I was watching a man on the street thing, and those are always kind of awkward and inaccurate because people are just going about their lives, or like grocery shopping, and then all of a sudden you're like the Jay Leno jaywalking things, and they were designed to be funny.
Yes,
but
because people are not always that stupid. It's just that you're suddenly confronted with this thing you weren't thinking about it. You're not prepared. You're just your brain was elsewhere, and suddenly you're being asked this question.
Right. So anyway, they were asking university students if we should talk about how great America is. And they're like, no, America's not that great of a country. We shouldn't go on acting like we're better than everybody else, and going on and on and on. And I'm thinking to myself, so if we're not the best country, then what country is? Because I want to move there because I want to live in the best country.
Well, the other thing, too, that's weird about that attitude is that you never see that reflected by any other country. That is, you ask a person from France, and of course, yes, we are the best country. It's
we are the best country.
But it's like, I did my graduate work at UCLA. So, of course, UCLA is far superior to USC.
But it is.
Yes.
I mean, that's a fact. That's not an opinion. That's just a fact. And it is verifiable fact. It's in the better neighborhood.
This is true.
They have the prettier colors.
Anyway, my point being that...
I never went to UCLA. I just had to like it to marry him.
Yes. But my point is that, your parents are, your mother is your father is the strongest, your mother is the most prettiest. Sorry. You think well of those things that you're fond of.
My dog is the cutest.
Yes. And so it's just...
He's also the worst.
And so it's weird. I mean, you recognize for yourself, that so-and-so or your friend, whoever may have certain flaws, but you're not going to just completely always be downgrading that person, saying horrible thing, boy, you look ratty today. Who dressed you?
Do you get dressed in the dark?
Yeah, as you might joke about on occasion, but I mean, if all you do is just constantly run your neighbor down or your friend down all the time, eventually they're not going to be around you anymore. They don't want to hear from you anymore. You'll be all by yourself and lonesome and even more miserable than you were before because you're a person that can't say anything nice about anybody. It's just weird. It's not normal. It's actually, if you suffer from depression, what you do as a depressed person is that you reinterpret everything in your life in a negative way. Something positive happens, you downplay it, you find a way to twist it to make it not a good thing, or you'll just pretend it's not even there. That is, every single thing that happens to you just reinforces your decision that there's nothing good. And so if all you're doing is saying negative things about everything, that's kind of a depressive situation. Again, don't spend all your time watching the news. It's not good for you.
Yep.
It doesn't give you a picture of reality.
Right.
It gives you a skewed view of things. It's not accurate any more than a depressed person has an accurate view of themselves or their circumstances or what's going on around them.
Right. My new habit on the way home from work is to listen to comedy. I like dry bar comedy because it's all clean comedy. They do it in a comedy club. They film it in a comedy club in Provo, Utah. So it's primarily Mormons that go to these shows, and
So it's designed for, it's a Mormon friendly.
Yeah, so it's a much cleaner comedy, and they're just funny. I mean, some of them are duds, some of them aren't that funny.
Well, that's the nature of comedy.
I drive home like busted, got laughing, and people must think I'm crazy. I went into Staples, I had my earbuds in, and I'm laughing out loud because this guy was so funny, and I'm just walking through Staples like, like looking at. I was looking for index cards and labels. So I'm looking at the labels, like laughing. I'm really enjoying my label shopping. Yeah. So, brighten up your life. Go to Staples listening to a comedy show and laugh at the labels. I ended up not buying the index cards. I wanted really bright colored ones. The only ones were in this giant pack. I don't want to spend that much money. Because I have really bright colored ones at school. I just forgot to bring them home with me. But I'll just stick them on Monday. So... Anyway, we are almost out of time.
Yes.
So tell us, what is our topic for next week?
Our topic next week is...
on the Facebook page.
Here it is.
Oh. What would Jesus do? Get out your bracelets, folks. Your Jesus junk bracelets. Let's find out, what would Jesus do?
Yes. Well, there's... One of the things he might do is pull out a whip and start hitting people with it. So,
yes, we have
turning over tables and that sort of thing. So, it's more complicated than what you'd think.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's the
question. So we will see you next Saturday at 4. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us today. It was great. I had fun. I hope you did too. Oreo's going to say bye.
And of course now everything is stable in the stream, so I don't know how long it's been that way.
It's on and off.
I know.
Anyway, have a good one. We'll see you next Saturday
Yep.
at 4 Pacific time.